at the end of the day, I think the issue is that the amount of money that's going to be required is government level money. This is not something that the richest people of the world can fund. I mean, even if you took, for example, the 10 richest people on Earth, or even the 20 richest people on Earth, and even if they donated all their net worth, it wouldn't be enough money, right? So this is something that's going to require the wealth of the entire world through governments. So governments have to take this on and choose to put the money that's required to actually deploy the technology we need. The way, at a very high level, the simple way it would work, right, is they just have to provide the money that we need to build this infrastructure quickly. That money can be provided as some form of loan with maybe a low interest rate, and we'll pay the money back because ultimately the market itself will pay for it. It's just that it won't get deployed. It won't actually get shifted onto the grid fast enough. And so you have to pay up front, get it all out there, and then gradually earn the money back, presumably with some small amount of interest. So it's not as though the world has to go bankrupt to do this. It's more so that the governments have to own the fact that the speed with which it all has to happen faster than if you're just doing replacements of power plants. If we don't act on it, then I think the cost is all human life. So our technology actually tries to solve the energy storage dilemma in large part. It's not the entire solution. For example, one of the limitations of our battery is that it could store energy for hours and days, but probably shouldn't store it for many months, right? And so there are other technologies that are envisioned to be very complementary in that respect that can store energy for months and years. In short, we got government funding to run a series of experiments and build a series of prototypes that proved that it worked. We can change the way we think by going beyond just stating open-ended goals and saying, we're going to get there. And I think the key thing is when you're really serious about doing something, you have to make a plan. And that plan's got to be tangible. It's got to have some strategy embedded in it. And it's got to have the resources necessary to actually execute it. And I think that's the piece that's missing. And once you have that, then you can now bring to the table accountability and say, well, how well are we hitting our milestones in time that we've laid out that we must hit in order to get to our goal on time? Fossil fuels is definitely the root cause of climate change in general. I think the piece that we're missing is that it's been effectively lip service paid to the idea of hitting climate goals, right? So it's an ideal thing to just say we'll do, but we have to actually have a plan for actually executing the process of getting to the solution. And I think that's the piece that's missing that I'm calling for, which is what's the actual plan? And because as soon as you detail the plan, the immediate question that follows is who's going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for all these things that you've now laid out very specifically have to happen on this timetable? Then you can now hold people, governments, organizations, whatever, accountable to achieving what it is that they actually said they were going to do. And so I stick back to this analogy that I mentioned after the talk, which is it's no different than me having a friend and saying, come pick me up at 7 p.m. And my friend says, okay, I'll do it. That's like setting a goal. And accountability would be me not being happy or being upset with them and they don't show up at 7 p.m. That's effectively what we've done as a world so far, is say we're going to get to net zero by 2050. And if we don't, we're going to be mad about it. What I'm saying is silly and unrealistic about it is like I've asked my friend to come pick me up at 7 p.m. and I know he doesn't have a car. And it's kind of dumb to sit there and say that when we know we have not allocated and created the resources needed to actually execute the goal, to achieve the goal. And so this is the part that's missing. I think we have to get realistic. Yes, it's going to be expensive, but we do have the money, right? It's not as though the money doesn't exist. That's why I give this example in the talk about there being $7 trillion spent by the world on subsidies for oil and gas. We are still spending money on making what is the problem cheap enough to continue to survive. This is a simple reallocation of those resources. You make what's problematic more expensive, or you allow it to be as expensive as it truly is by not subsidizing it, and use the money that's being used to subsidize it to actually fuel the solution. This is a very rudimentary view that I'm pointing out, but my point is that there are plenty of people that are smart, that are well-educated, and very, very passionate about this that can come together and make a plan. And once that plan is tangible and concretized, then we can begin executing it, and then you can get mad about not hitting goals, right? But until there's a plan in place, I think we're just not really taking it seriously enough. I think the average person can take it upon themselves to get very politically active. I think that when people appreciate the scale of the problem, it's not just a U.S. problem, right? It's a global problem. And wherever you are, whatever the government is, wherever you are, you have to get active and you got to push for this very, very hard, right? This is going to require a global movement in a certain direction that we all coordinate to do. And this is why I give the analogy of the Manhattan Project, right? The creation of nuclear bombs wasn't going to happen on its own. It takes a government coordinated effort that's funded and well organized and strategic to execute it that fast. That's the kind of attitude and that's the kind of approach we need here.